Cale Harper rubbed the back of his neck as the Andromeda expanse stretched out before him like a canvas of endless darkness flecked with starlight, and he muttered under his breath, "Another day in the void, and I still get coffee spills instead of glory." The bridge of the patrol ship, Orion's Edge, hummed with quiet efficiency, the soft clatter of control panels punctuated by the occasional beep of navigation systems detecting distant asteroids. Cale had always preferred patrolling these uncharted sectors alone, but Command had insisted on a mandatory observational partner, a term that sounded more like punishment than strategy. His only companion was a hovering service droid that had somehow developed a habit of rolling sideways when ignored, bumping into consoles with the precision of a drunk ballerina. Then, out of the starfield, a shape coalesced. At first, Cale thought it was a rogue comet, but the angular symmetry and the crystalline glint told him otherwise. The ship wasn't just alien, it was theatrical. It sparkled like someone had tried to build a spaceship out of cut glass and sarcasm. "Great," Cale muttered. "I've always wanted my first contact to involve potential death by glitter." The alien ship approached cautiously, moving with a fluid elegance that made the human patrol vessel seem clunky and slow. Cale squinted at the readings. Life signs 1, possibly 2, and they weren't human. He leaned back, trying to keep his tone casual even as adrenaline tickled his spine. "Well, let's see what the universe has for breakfast." The console beeped at him. "Incoming transmission," it announced. Cale grabbed the interface, expecting the usual blaring message, perhaps a demand to surrender or some unintelligible alien threat. Instead, a figure appeared, framed by the shimmering hull, like a mirage in zero gravity. She looked human, but with long, elegant ears that tapered toward her head like delicate blades of silvered glass. Her eyes glowed faintly, catching the ship's dim light, and her hair drifted around her shoulders as if she were underwater. Cale blinked, rubbing his eyes. Either I've been awake too long, or the universe just decided to throw me a model with combat training. The alien tilted her head, observing him with the kind of scrutiny reserved for scientists examining a particularly messy lab rat. "Identify yourself," Cale said, forcing a tone that was more commanding than confident. He gestured at the console to stop the service droid from bumping again, but it ignored him entirely, spinning in place like a tiny, obstinate planet. The alien raised one long-fingered hand and then lowered it, a gesture that seemed halfway between a salute and an expression of confusion. Her voice came through the comm, smooth and melodic. "I am Liara of the Merithian Empire. We come in acknowledgement, not aggression." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the ship's interior. "Though your environment is curious." Cale snorted, shifting in his chair. "Curious is one word for it. Coffee stains, missing screws, and a droid with delusions of grandeur. Curious is flattering." He caught himself and added, "Welcome, I guess." Liara's eyes narrowed. "You humans have peculiar humor." Her voice carried a faint chuckle, though the note was restrained like a violin string quivering at the wrong moment. "Curiosity is noted. It may be advantageous." The alien ship docked with precise fluidity, and Cale found himself escorting her down a narrow corridor. Liara moved with an otherworldly grace, stepping lightly despite the human gravity, her long ears flicking occasionally, as if sensing vibrations Cale couldn't perceive. The patrol ship's corridors, however, were far from glamorous. Cale stumbled over a stray maintenance cable, almost colliding with a storage locker, and muttered, "One day I'll stop looking heroic in my own eyes." "Today is not that day." Liara tilted her head again, watching him with an expression that might have been amusement. "You are surprisingly uncoordinated for one in command," she said, voice tinged with mockery. "Do your kind excel in other areas?" Cale grinned despite himself, mostly sarcasm and spilling coffee. "Occasionally we save entire colonies, but that's the boring part." He gestured vaguely at the corridor. "Watch your step. The floor has a personal vendetta against me." By the time they reached the bridge, Kale realized he was studying her more than the ship systems. Liara was beautiful in an understated, alien way. The subtle shimmer of her bioluminescent markings along her arms, the way her ears twitched when she concentrated, the almost imperceptible vibration of her throat when she spoke. There was intelligence there, but also a mischievous spark that made her more unpredictable than any enemy he'd faced. Kale wondered if she was assessing him with the same fascination he felt, or if he was simply a messy human specimen in need of cataloging. "Do you always greet potential invaders with sarcasm?" Liara asked, leaning against a console like it had gravity all its own. "It is unusual." Kale shrugged. Unusual is a lifestyle choice. He glanced at the droid, which had somehow gotten itself tangled in a supply cart, and apparently a contagious one. "You'll get used to it, maybe." They settled into an uneasy rhythm, exchanging cautious questions and light-hearted jabs. Liara admitted that her mission had initially been to observe and report, possibly neutralize, human activity. Kale, in turn, told tales of misadventures during patrols, embellishing the stories just enough to make her laugh. It was the first sound he had heard from an alien that didn't include threat, demand, or protocol. Soft, melodic laughter that seemed to echo in the metallic corridors. Hours passed, measured in awkward glances, shared jokes, and Kale's futile attempts to explain the intricacies of human coffee culture. "It's a ritual," he said, holding up a cup like it was sacred. "One drop spilled and the entire day collapses into chaos. It's terrifying, really." Liara tilted her head, examining the cup. "You are easily terrified by a liquid substance." Her voice carried amusement, disbelief threading through her careful cadence. "Easily, maybe, but also wisely," Kale replied, raising the cup in mock solemnity. "It's the first line of defense against alien invasions. Never underestimate coffee." In that bizarre, caffeine-scented bubble of the bridge, something unspoken began to form between them. A bridge not of treaties or weapons, but of humor, curiosity, and a shared acknowledgement that the universe was, above all else, absurdly unpredictable. Liara's ears twitched in subtle approval. Kale's grin widened. And for a brief moment, two beings from entirely different worlds found themselves laughing at the same cosmic joke, unaware that the real test of their alliance and their hearts was only just beginning. And as the Orion's edge drifted further into the glittering expanse, Kale muttered to himself, "Great. First contact, long ears, glowing markings, and somehow, I think I'm in trouble already." Liara's first full day aboard the Orion's edge began with her stepping into the gravity-adjusted corridor and promptly bouncing off a wall, as if she were a comet with attitude. Kale, who had been sipping coffee with the solemnity of a monk performing a sacred ritual, barely suppressed a laugh. "You do realize the walls aren't trying to eat you, right?" he said. Liara blinked, tilting her long ears back in what might have been indignation or suspicion. "Gravity here behaves inconsistently," she replied, brushing herself off as though she were accustomed to far more exacting physical laws. Kale snorted. "Inconsistent, sure. I call it Monday." The droid, still wobbling along with a confidence that defied physics, bumped into her ankle, prompting Liara to step back with an expression that could have frozen stars. "Your servant is odd," she said, voice laced with barely restrained amusement. "It has the coordination of a nebula in a windstorm." "That's not coordination. That's personality," Kale said, waving a hand as if the concept were obvious. "It's crucial for morale, you'll see, maybe." By the time they reached the mess hall, Liara had already asked 27 questions about human dining rituals, 3 of which Kale had answered with deadpan seriousness, and the remaining 24 with exaggerated absurdity. "This," Kale said, gesturing to a tray of protein cubes that smelled faintly like synthetic almonds and cosmic dust, "is sacred fuel. It keeps us alive and polite, mostly polite, and sometimes alive, definitely mostly alive." Liara studied the tray with the same intensity an astrophysicist might give a collapsing star. You consume these cubes at what frequency? She asked, tone dripping curiosity and the faintest hint of horror. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, emotional breakdowns, late-night snack attacks, and occasional celebrations of surviving asteroid showers, Kale replied, scooping one into his mouth and grimacing slightly. Very nutritious, questionable taste, but morale is boosted by pretending it tastes amazing. She tasted one. Her face betrayed a mix of fascination, surprise, and something suspiciously like human distaste. Indeed, she said, lowering the cube, I detect effort. Kale laughed. Effort is half the battle, the other half is survival and sarcasm. They spent the next few hours exploring the ship, Liara constantly marveling at, or loudly questioning, human technology. Elevators were tiny death boxes, buttons were oddly tactile contraptions, and the ship's artificial intelligence, which Kale had affectionately named Marvin, was described as curiously pessimistic yet strangely loyal. Liara tested each system in turn, often with Kale following behind, tripping over wires and swearing under his breath, which prompted a soft, lilting laugh from her that seemed to brighten the sterile metal corridors. Eventually, they found themselves in the navigation hub, a room filled with holographic maps and blinking indicators. Liara floated near the center, ears twitching as she studied the 3D projection of the Andromeda expanse. Your navigational methods are primitive yet effective, she said. We would use quantum gravimetric folding and temporal triangulation, but I suppose this works in a pinch. Kale leaned over the console, trying to look modest while simultaneously feeling absurdly proud. It's called improvisation, very human, sometimes genius, sometimes catastrophic. It depends on the coffee-to-sarcasm ratio. Liara raised an eyebrow. I would like to see this ratio in practice. He grinned. Step 1, drink coffee. Step 2, complain loudly. Step 3, panic gracefully during a crisis. Step 4, survive. Just then an alert flashed across the console. Kale stiffened slightly. Ah, crisis stage 0, perfect timing. Liara's ears flicked forward. Stage 0, she asked, voice half amusement, half curiosity. We call it that when the universe decides it's going to test your patience without warning, Kale said. Mostly harmless. Usually. He punched a few buttons, and the holographic map shimmered to reveal a rogue asteroid cluster moving directly toward a nearby human research station. See, harmless. Liara's eyes narrowed. Direct course. Straight through, Kale said, rubbing his temples. Directly, in a straight line, as if the cosmos itself has a personal vendetta against paperwork. Liara floated closer, examining the trajectory. We could adjust the station's orbit with minimal force if your propulsion systems allow for vector modifications. Kale blinked, impressed despite himself. You just offered to fix a problem I haven't caused yet. That's alarming efficiency. Efficiency is sometimes necessary, she said, her voice calm but deliberate. Though humans prefer improvisation, yes. Kale grinned. You're catching on fast, maybe too fast. I was enjoying the chaos. They worked together, Liara manipulating controls with her long, delicate fingers while Kale provided commentary. Some useful, some purely comedic. Yes, yes, push that lever. No, not that lever, that's the self-destruct. Just kidding. Sort of. Liara's laughter echoed off the metal walls, a sound that felt oddly grounding amid the chaos. When the asteroid cluster finally shifted course and the station was safe, Kale sank into his chair, wiping his brow dramatically. And that, ladies and long-eared gentlemen, is why improvisation beats perfection almost every time. Liara's ears twitched. Almost every time, she echoed, a trace of humor in her tone. Perhaps I should learn this method. You will, Kale said, nudging a button to summon the coffee dispenser. Step 1, drink coffee. Step 2, complain about gravity and aliens. Step 3, improvise. He handed her a cup which she examined as if it were an alien artifact. Step 4, survive with style, he added. For a while, they simply sipped coffee in companionable silence, interrupted only by the droid bumping into consoles, a blinking indicator going off, or Kale making a running commentary on the absurdity of life aboard a patrol ship. Liara's presence, once a source of tension, had become a curious blend of intrigue and amusement, a puzzle wrapped in elegance and humor. By the end of the day, Kale found himself laughing at his own jokes more than usual, and Liara was teasing him in return, questioning his unorthodox command methods and offering subtle corrections that were somehow both irritating and endearing. When the lights dimmed for the ship's rest cycle, she allowed Kale to guide her to the sleeping quarters, her hand brushing his, deliberate yet hesitant. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight neither of them fully acknowledged. Kale grinned under his blanket, muttering, "So far, alien in the bridge, rogue asteroids, coffee disasters, and somehow, I like this chaos." Liara, floating beside him in a gravity-neutral sleep chamber, simply tilted her head and smiled faintly, long ears curling back. "It seems tolerable," she murmured. And for the first time, both human and Merithian felt the subtle thrill of a bridge forming between worlds, fragile yet undeniable, held together by laughter, mistakes, and the unlikeliest of companions. The alarm rang like a cosmic kazoo, shrill and insistent, bouncing off the walls of the Orion's edge and rattling Kale awake before he had even finished his first cup of coffee. Liara, already alert, floated near the control console, her long ears angled forward in an expression that was, if Kale had to guess, equal parts exasperation and amusement. "You humans sleep at the oddest times," she said, her voice carrying over the clatter of warnings. Kale yawned, rubbing his face. "Odd times, that's a diplomatic way of saying you're jealous of my sleep schedule. Admit it." He stumbled toward the console, nearly tripping over the droid, which had apparently decided that slamming into the same wall repeatedly was an appropriate morning ritual. Liara ignored him, scanning the holographic display with her glowing eyes. "We are receiving multiple vectors of hostile energy signatures," she said calmly. "Your patrol has encountered a Merithian battalion approaching at hyperspeed. They are not friendly." Kale's grin spread despite the danger. "Well, at least it's not just paperwork today. Roll out the red carpet, we've got guests." He tapped a few controls, initiating evasive maneuvers, and muttered, "Hopefully they enjoy zero-gravity twister." The Orion's edge lurched as energy beams lanced past, sparking against the ship's shields. Liara leaned into the console, long fingers dancing across the controls. "I can reroute power to shields, but the attack patterns are erratic. They are using, if I may be frank, ridiculous strategies." Kale chuckled, dodging another volley. "Ridiculous? That's military genius for humans, at least. Maybe Merithians have the same definition. Either way, we're about to test your improvisation skills. Long ears." Liara's eyes glimmered. "Improvisation, yes. I believe I am beginning to understand your charm." She pushed a lever, redirecting energy to the engines, and the ship swerved with a fluidity that almost looked graceful. Kale leaned over her shoulder, grinning. "See, chaos is manageable with coffee, sarcasm, and panicked brilliance. Step 3 in my patented survival plan." Their banter continued even as the battle escalated. The rogue Merithians lobbed plasma torpedoes, but Kale and Liara, working in unison, used clever maneuvers that involved spinning corridors, faulty droids, and enough sarcastic commentary to bewilder the attackers. At one point, Kale yelled, "Duck," and by duck I mean metaphorically, or actually just duck. Liara smirked, sliding sideways through a zero-gravity corridor, ears flicking with delight, before landing perfectly behind the console to redirect power to shields. Amid the chaos, Liara's demeanor shifted subtly. She had once been the disciplined observer, loyal to protocol, cautious to a fault. But now she moved with a confidence born of shared struggle, relying on instincts and laughter as much as calculations. Kale noticed a fleeting pride flickering through his usual sarcasm. "You're Really good at this, he said, dodging a beam that turned the droid into an impromptu projectile. She glanced at him, ears twitching. Perhaps I am learning, not just your methods but your perspective. Survival and enjoyment may coincide. The battalion pressed harder, but the two of them, surprisingly synchronized, turned the ship's chaos into advantage. Using a combination of Kale's human improvisation and Liara's alien precision, they led the hostile fleet into a debris field, where spinning asteroid shards and glowing gas clouds slowed the attackers. Kale leaned back, arms crossed, voice dripping with mock formality. And that, ladies and long-eared gentlemen, is why you should never underestimate a human and their alien sidekick. Liara's quiet laugh, bright against the background of alarms, was a stark contrast to the flashing warning lights. Sidekick, I am a competent partner, she corrected, a faint blush touching her cheeks. Kale grinned. Partner. I like the sound of that. Much better than sidekick, sounds heroic. Finally, the last of the hostile ships disengaged, retreating into the starfield with frustrated fury. The Orion's edge floated among the drifting debris, shields down to minimal power, and Kale slumped into his chair, exhaustion and exhilaration mixing in a rare quiet moment. Liara floated near him, long ears relaxed, eyes reflecting the starlight outside. It appears the threat is neutralized, she said softly. Kale leaned back, letting out a long sigh. Neutralized, yeah, but morale, that took a hit. Coffee spilled, droid nearly destroyed, pride slightly bruised. Overall, still a win. He caught her gaze and added, you know, I think I might actually like having you around. Danger, chaos, plus long ears that do something amazing when you concentrate. Liara's lips curved into a smile. I like having you around as well, Kale. Your methods are unconventional yet effective and amusing. She paused, her hand brushing against his. I find my loyalties are divided between my people and you. Kale raised an eyebrow, a grin tugging at his lips. You mean between imperial protocols and your favorite human who spills coffee like a heroic mess? Yes, she said simply, not flinching at the teasing tone. I choose to follow the heart. Kale's chest tightened, not with fear, not with victory, but with a warmth he had not expected. Well, he said, reaching for her hand, lucky for me, my heart seems to have a personal vendetta against loneliness. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that feels full, heavy with unspoken promises and shared triumphs. The galaxy stretched around them, vast and unpredictable, but in that moment, Kale and Liara had carved out a corner of certainty, a fragile but undeniable bridge between worlds. Over the following days, the patrol ship became a place of laughter, experiments, and tiny absurd adventures. Liara learned human expressions, often misusing them in ways that made Kale nearly spit out coffee, and Kale began to understand the elegance of her alien thought processes, marveling at the way she could calculate trajectories in seconds while making sarcastic commentary on the ship's decor. They debated, joked, and occasionally bickered, but always with the unspoken acknowledgement that each had changed, softened, and opened in ways neither had anticipated. Eventually, Liara contacted her superiors, explaining the events and insisting on an alliance that favored understanding over combat. Her recommendation was met with cautious approval, largely because Kale's improvisation, coupled with her insights, had saved countless human and Merithian lives. The bridge between the two species, once tentative, had become a foundation for something new. Kale stared at the expanse beyond the viewport, hand in Liara's, long ears brushing lightly against his arm. You know, he said, voice half teasing, half serious, I used to think first contact was going to be terrifying. Turns out it's mostly coffee spills and witty insults. Liara laughed softly, a sound that seemed to settle the stars themselves. I suppose terrifying is overrated, she replied. Perhaps unpredictable is better. And Kale prompted, raising an eyebrow. And worth it, she said, letting her hand rest fully in his. Even across worlds, across species, some choices must be made for the heart. Kale smiled, feeling the weight of everything. The battles, the laughter, the absurdity of surviving rogue asteroids, the small victories and near disasters, and realized that he had grown, not just as a soldier, but as a man capable of connection, trust, and love beyond expectation. The ship hummed gently, drifting toward new horizons. Stars shimmered against the endless void, but inside the Orion's edge, amidst coffee, floating droids, and sarcastic commentary, a human and a long-eared alien found something rare in the cosmos: certainty in each other, and a love that bridged the infinite expanse. And as the galaxy stretched before them, Kale whispered, "Let's see what kind of trouble we can get into next, partner." Liara's soft laugh followed him into the stars, and for the first time, Kale felt the universe was exactly the right kind of unpredictable.